So you got this thing called the Hippopotamus Defense. You got this guy named Hikaru Nakamura. And apparently, when you mix the two together, you get good results. Let's take a look. This game was played this past year in 2022. Hikaru with the black pieces, his GM opponent, starting this thing off with d4. And now we have g6 and bishop g7 from Hikaru. This is how I personally start off my games. However, on the third move, I like to play the move of d6. But we see the GM here go with the move of b6. Okay, now the Hippo is a setup that we're trying to reach around move 9 or 10. Okay, so there's a bunch of different ways that you can get into it. I play the modern to get into it. I used to play the Owens defense, which is also another way that you can get into it. I've seen the Perk, I've seen the French. There's so many move orders, and this is one of them, right? One of the ways that you can play the Hippo is just feeding and shadowing those bishops right away. I will say that there are some potential issues with this overall, but okay. I mean, I'm not gonna, stand here and say that Hikaru is making huge mistakes, because at this point in the game, against the setup that white is taking, he's not. We have this move of g3 now. And okay, d6, I mean, we've fiend shadowed our bishops, right? So now it's just a matter of tucking those knights in, and that's exactly what Hikaru does. We got a bishop g2 from white. They're thinking, well, I guess if you're gonna fiend shadow your bishops, I might as well too. And okay, knight d7, e6, and we tuck that second knight in. We have bishop e2, castling kingside, e4, white going, fine. I'll take control of the center with e4 and d4 if you insist. Okay, I mean, you got to do it eventually, right? And okay, h6 and rook e1. Now, in order to get a full thick-skinned Hippo, as I've called it on this channel, black would have to play the move of a6 here. Why didn't Hikaru do this? Well, he didn't, because there's a pawn on c4. At least that's, the reason and why you shouldn't play a6 in a position here. Okay, now, okay, first off, one of the purposes of playing a6 is that it frees you up to play c5. Now, first off, I don't know why we'd want to play c5 in a position like this, as white could take, and this queen is going to be just absolutely crashing down on our d file to start the game off. But okay, without a pawn on a6, right? If we play c5, just going to move back. Like here, if we play c5, that's, in some positions, white could play something like knight b5 and start putting pressure on that weak d6 pawn, okay? But by playing a6, right, knight b5 is no longer an option, okay? And this is important. This is one of the main purposes of playing a6, to free up c5, to play h6, to free up f5. But there's two other reasons for playing the move of a6, and I think that they are both extremely important. First off, a6 is, in a lot of situations with the Hippo, supposed to really support this b5 advancement on the queen side. And in this case, guys, b5 is just off the table. It is not an option because of this pawn on c4, right? If this pawn was on c2, I mean, yeah, a6, b5, why not take some space, right? But in this case, because there's a pawn on c4, if we ever do play b5, white's just going to take. The second reason to play a6 is to actually be ready to respond from white in terms of a4 and a5 from them. The whole idea being, in that kind of situation, we don't want to let white just take our pawns and start, messing things up. We don't want to take that pawn on a5. When white does a4 and a5, we want to push with the move of b5. But again, in this kind of setup, because the pawn is on c4, we can't play that move. So if we do play a move like a6, white may just play a4, and all of a sudden we're in a position where it's like, okay, I mean, we could play knight c6 to stop this guy, but okay, I mean, if we want to stop it with the pawn, we got to play a5. We just moved the pawn twice. Okay, so a general principle, okay, when you're playing the Hippo, if you see a pawn on c4, don't play a6. If you see a pawn on f4, don't play h6. But if you don't see a pawn on one of those squares, you're good to play it. Okay, now going back to the game, we have rook e1. Hikaru here doesn't play a6 because, again, b5 is not an option, but what he does play is the move of g5. Now, he wouldn't have played this if there was a pawn on f4, but there's not. So because of that, black is free to play h6 and g5, okay? Now we have this move of a4, and it's good that Hikaru didn't play a6 because he's now able to drop his pawn right on a5. This does weaken the square of b5 a little bit. Okay, so at some point, in fact, right now, if white wants to, they can just jump the knight right in, and that's something to be aware of. At the same time, white is also weakening their b4 square. In fact, this is very weak. This is considered a hole because for the rest of this game, I don't care what you try to do, there is no pawn for white that can ever kick a minor piece out, right? There's no pawn. No matter what you play, there's no pawn that can kick a minor piece out of b4. So b5 and b4 are a little bit weak, but it's a trade-off, right? You get a weakness, I get a weakness, and yeah, we go from there. So we have this move of queen c2. Now here Hikaru missed I mean, just a way to win a pawn. Okay. Now, here's my question for you. When you're playing the Hippo and you get that 9 or 10 move, you know, set up, you're in the middle game, what's the first thing you look at? You got to look at the center, right? You got to look at White's pawns and see how many defenders each one has, right? Now, by central pawns, I specifically mean the E and D pawns, okay? Now, you could look at the F and C as well, right? Those are, you know, those are flank pawns, but I'm talking about the very center pawns. How many defenders does this pawn have? Well, it has 3, okay? How many attackers do we have? 1. So, in all honesty, I mean, yeah, this pawn's just not a huge target, right? I mean, White has that pretty well under control. Even if we play knight f6, White doesn't have to do anything. They could just sit there, and they're fine, all right? What about the pawn on d4? Well, in this case, White has 1 defender. We have 1 attacker. Okay, now it's kind of close. Is there a way to remove this guy? Yep, by playing the move of g4, right? And okay, you can lose your knight or you can run away with your knight and we snatch off that central pawn. This is, I mean, great for us if we're trying to throw pieces into e5 or c5. And at the end of the day, we're just up a pawn. Okay, we're just up a pawn here. This pawn on g4 is a little bit advanced, but if black plays this correctly, we are going to be more than okay. All right, so that's one thing to consider, okay? It's very easy for the opponent against the Hippo to miss stuff like g4 or b4, just kicking these knights around. And in this case, Hikaru had a chance to play g4, but instead plays this move of knight c6, going for this pawn. White here should have went with the move of knight b5, right? It's a weakness, right? It's a weakness at the end of the day, okay? I mean, we can play c6 at some point, but then d6 is going to be weak. You got to think about pawns as the fence line of chess. They are very important, right? I mean, you know, when I first started playing, when a lot of people start playing, they think of the pawns as these wimpy little things that don't mean much. They matter a ton. They really do, okay? They really do kind of guide the direction of the game overall. And okay, in this case, we have knight c6. I mean, double attack on this guy, as well as eyeing up that b4 square, which is important. I mean, White here plays d5, and this is exactly what we want. When we play the Hippo, we're going for that slow burn approach. We're not trying to win the game right away. We're not putting pressure on ourselves to win the game by move 15 or 16, which, by the way, Hikaru did win this in 16 moves. But, okay, we're not trying, you know, and we're not putting pressure on ourselves to win the game outright, out the get-go. Okay, we're getting a solid position, and we're slowly improving. We're slowly jabbing. We're slowly making some movements and trying to gain space, trying to gain activity, all that kind of good stuff. And eventually, right, the snowball continues to grow and grow and grow, and it can convert into a winning position, right? Now, when we're doing that, when we're playing slowly, when we're improving, we actually want our opponent to go crazy on us and push their pawns and attack our king and act like the Hippo's not very good, because that's going to actually form cracks in their wall. And ironically, they're the ones that are going to be the targets. Okay, that's the goal of the Hippo in the early stages. If your opponent goes crazy on you, it often means that they're making a mistake. Okay, in this case, White is. Okay, now this may look really aggressive and stuff, but black just plays knight b4, and guess what? Your queen's under attack, and my bishop just got a heck ton better. Okay, the queen runs away. Well, by playing that, again, you left some cracks in the wall, some holes in the wall here. Let's take one of them. Let's play this move of knight c5. Boom. b3 is a target. All of a sudden, White brings the queen back, trying to defend it. And here Hikaru throws a knight into d3, and White resigns the game. A GM just lost in 16 moves to the Hippopotamus Defense. Okay, and yes, Hikaru played this game, but just think about that for a second. A GM... a grandmaster lost to the Hippo in 16 moves. Just think about that. Okay, next time you hear someone say that the Hippo's not good and they can't, you know, 2200 plus, 1800 plus, it's not good. Just think about that, right? A GM lost in 16 moves, and it takes 10 moves to set up the Hippo, 9 or 10 moves, right? Depending on how you play it. So, yeah, I mean, this is just a crushing position for black. And some of you guys, and this is fair, may be asking, like, why is White resigning this, right? Like, black's better here, but why is White resigning? Well, because they're playing against Hikaru Nakamura, and if you go down any material at all, you might as well just know that you lost. Okay? You might as well just know that you lost. Yeah, I mean, in this case, we're forking the rook and the bishop. You know, if you want to save your bishop, right? I mean, really the best thing that White could do here is just go, you know what, I'm not I'm not going to try to hang on to everything, but let's say white does. Let's say white plays rook e2, defending this bishop. Well, in that case, let's take that thing off, and then guess what? The knight on c3 is no longer defended. So we take that guy, and you're still going to lose the exchange again. Okay, so when a rook runs away, we take one of the rooks, and yeah, I mean, we're up 5 points in material, and I'm sorry, but if you're down 5 against Hikaru, yeah, I'm sorry, it's just not going to work out. So yeah, so knight d3 here, and white resigns the game. I mean, we're threatening to go up the exchange. We're threatening to just go up a piece here. We have a great bishop on g7, just slicing and dicing. And if you try to save everything, you actually lose more. Great game by Hikaru. Again, in the early stages, I'm personally not a fan of the double fianchetto, just because I think it can give white the ability, in a sense, to really kind of overexpand in the center without us being able to lock it up in a precise way. But there's been, I've seen other GMs do this. Okay, I've seen other grandmaster players, go with this double fianchetto type thing, and it works out. Okay, it's solid. So this is one of the ways that you can play the Hippo. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. What I will warn you against, I have had subscribers tell me that they like to, play d6, e6, and tuck the knights, and then look to fianchetto. In that case, I really think you should fianchetto first, okay? Because you can kind of tuck the knights whenever, generally speaking, but just think about it this way, right? Let's say we're doing our thing, right? We're doing our thing. We're tucking both of these knights in, okay? We're tucking both of those knights. Then you see this. And this kind of stops us, in a sense, from ever playing b6, because white would just go crazy on that diagonal. And now we're forced into a position where we're playing rook b8, and let's say, white plays a3. Let's just say we play the move of bishop b7 here. Okay, now white here doesn't need to take, but I would say, even if they did, a fianchettoed rook is not what is usually considered a good idea. Okay, a fianchettoed bishop, great. A fianchettoed rook, it's just not doing the same thing a bishop is. All right, let's be honest. I mean, yeah, if I'm white here, if I'm playing as white, that rook is it's just not freaking me out. It's just not. I mean, yeah, it's not posing much of a threat to me, like literally at all. So that's one thing to think about. Okay, so if you do go for, a more like, okay, I'm tucking the knights or I'm fianchettoing the bishops first, that's fine, but fianchetto the bishops, just do it. Okay, trust me. By the way, if you have pushback against me on that, please let me know down in the comment section below. Let me know how you navigate that if you're tucking your knights first and they fianchetto their bishops. I kind of go back and forth a little bit. I do bishop knight, and then I do knight bishop or bishop knight. So I kind of go back and forth a little bit. I go with g6. We'll just continue with the game. So, here Hikaru plays b6. Again, I would have played the move of d6 here, and then e6, tuck this knight, right? And then from there, okay, then I can, look to fianchetto a bishop and then tuck the other knight. I go for a more well-rounded kind of approach, right? And I eventually get the setup. But there's a lot of different ways that you can get into the Hippo. The big thing here is that, the white, right? White really, and again, white made some mistakes here. I mean, queen c2, g4 was just a great move for black. That's the computer move here. Stockfish loves it, okay? But even after knight c6, I mean, white needs to play knight b5, but when white over pushes here, there's going to be cracks in the wall. And that's what Hikaru sees here, knight b4. White's pushed so far that they already have a hole on b4, and c5 is extremely weak. So we take control of that. We're attacking that pawn. We throw a knight in. We get a grandmaster to resign the game. Thanks for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so that you don't miss out on anything coming our way. And on top of that, I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of November in 2023. Big love to y'all. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon member, you can click on a link down in the description below. And in that, you will see all the benefits, including one in which we recently added, which is actually a once a month session with me, in which case we go over patrons games. I'll see y'all in the next one.